Hello, everyone. Welcome. I guess we have a trip to make. And of course, this is all about the volcanoes tonight. And my intention is to take you on a bit of a historic tour of the most or the best known volcanoes in Iceland. And we are going to start with the best known one, which is Hekla. You can see the live volcano from Geldingadalur here in the corner. We will keep that on for a while anyway. But we are just about ready to go. Hekla. Now, if you drive away eastward from Reykjavik, you will have to maybe make a stop as you come to the edge of the mountain of Hellisheiði, because there you have a view over the southern low area, the plain, the southern plain. In view is probably some of Selfoss and the river Ölfus, and there in a distance to the right, you may be able to get a view of the Westmon Islands, and then this mountain to the left that we call Eyjafjallajökull. And if you'll have to go around the mountain, unless the weather is really clear, you may be able to see the peak of Hekla there to the left, further inland. Hekla is, at least it was, possibly the oldest, the best known. It's not the oldest, but it was the best known volcano in Iceland for several reasons. It is not very high. It is just under 1,500 meters, but still people wouldn't go up there. And it wasn't really climbed, they say, until in the 18th century by two fellows that were making a huge survey of Iceland. People did not go up there because they were superstitious, or no wonder they were, because it was preached from the pulpits of churches all over Europe that Hekla was the entrance to hell. And nobody wanted to get even close to it. People even believed that if you went up there, you would find an opening down into hell and possibly see the devil. But these two guys, Eggert Ólafsson and Bjarni Pálsson, their name were, they were surveying and actually making a account of the farms in Iceland, and being enlightened men, they climbed up on the top of Hekla and survived, didn't fall into hell. But this is how Hekla was viewed in the past. This is an old map of Hekla, and the southern Iceland, southern part of Iceland, Eyjafjallajökull is marked in there, and Sólheimajökull, other glaciers. But Hekla is like it takes over the whole area there, and that's not a true image. But people did actually have this strange superstition there. Hekla is depicted like a monster almost. But Hekla has erupted about 200 times. No, 20 times over the past 1,000 years, that's all. It's not 200 times, that would be too much. About 20 times in the past 1,000 years. And some of them have been quite spectacular, and others not so. In the latest eruptions were in 1970, and then in 1980 again. Just about every 10 years. That's she's pretty regular, Hekla is. We had an eruption in 1991, and then in 2000. On the average, it's supposed to even out about every 10 years, but now it has stayed silent for 21 years. And but geologists say it is bulging in 2 places, kind of getting ready to go, although like with all volcanoes, it's hard to say. Still, we haven't mastered the science of being actually able to tell for sure whether they are going to erupt and when. Hekla, together with Katla, are the most famous ones. Katla is a much bigger volcano, and people fear Katla if Katla was to go off. But I think Katla has definitely fallen in the shadow of Hekla because Hekla erupts so frequently. But Hekla is it's a beautiful mountain. It's quite a it has never erupted free of snow. That's one thing. There's always been snow on it, but of course the snow on it lasts most of the year and into the summer usually. And it used to be forested, they say, but it isn't anymore. Here I am on the Hekla. It is quite overgrown with moss, at least the lowest part, but most of it is just gravel and sand and cinder, and lava fields below it, of course. You can see the grass, well, the green is not grass, it is actually moss that is growing on the mountain. I've seen Hekla go off twice, been around when it went off, and but I haven't been close to it at all. Not gone onto the mountain while it was erupting anyway, like people are doing now with in Geldingadalur. People are there by the thousands a day, hundreds any given hour, and I don't know if you can make it out. There are sort of light dots around the volcano. Now these are people in the dark watching it. Some are even camping out there. But Hekla, like I said, best known volcano in Iceland, and it is accessible if you want to get over there. But the second best known volcano is getting to be like that now. Is this guy here. This is not actually a volcano, but a series of craters called Laki. And they have an incredible history. Because Laki erupted in the 18th century, late in the 18th century, 250 years ago. And it was absolutely catastrophic when Laki erupted. Laki, you can see that it is basically a series of multitude of craters. And it is in the south of Iceland, sort of well, you would have to drive from Reykjavik at least for 4 or 5 hours in order to get into Laki. But Laki had devastated Iceland, and not only Iceland, it devastated the world in a way when it erupted. The lava that flowed from it is said to be the largest lava field that has ever flowed in human history or memory. Massive craters. This one has a little bit of a lake at the bottom. This is not uncommon for lake to gather, water to gather inside craters once they have ceased erupting. But the reason why Laki has become so famous and is because that it had a recorded enormous effect on our world, because it erupted for a long time, several months, and ash and cinder gases were taken away in a massive cloud, and it probably went around the world 3 times at least, causing havoc and problems wherever it went. Laki, the eruption of Laki in 1784 is said to have contributed to world events, massive world events like the French Revolution. And that is something that it caused, of course, people to die in Iceland. About 1/3 of the nation actually died when Laki erupted. But the devastating effect were not only in Iceland. It was not because that they were caught by the lava or anything. It was because that the gases killed the grass and the vegetation. And that meant our livestock would die, and soon people were starving. People just died from pestilence and hunger, actually. At the time, the nation was only about 30,000, and 10,000 died. But it definitely had the effect all around Europe, and is said to have contributed to the French Revolution. Both Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin realized this. They were, I guess, better educated than most. And Benjamin, he, of course, was the one that discovered the Gulf Stream, that he was the postmaster of the United States when he discovered that it took ships shorter to get to Europe than back again, because they were carried by the Gulf Stream. But the pestilence that is described, that caused the storming of the Bastille in France, was caused by Laki. And in North America, for example, this time period is known or remembered by some of the Native Americans that call these years the years without summer. And there were massive side effects from it as well. It was not just in Europe, because it was also supposed to have disrupted the monsoon in Asia and wherever the monsoon affects. So although Icelanders are a small nation, and we don't have much pull on the international scene, our glaciers and our volcanoes definitely seem to be able to change the course of history. But from Laki, we will go on, and about 200 years or so forward, because this little fella, he became massively famous in 1963. It all started with a fishing boat called Ísleifur II, or Ísleifur Annar. And a fellow called Ólafur was on watch on the day of November the 14th, 1963. And he recorded the time at 7:15 in the morning. He suddenly felt some irregular movements on the ship. And like the ship was caught in a whirling stream. He looked around, and it seemed like something was rising out of the ocean. He didn't know what it was. It looked like a mountain, but he knew that there was no mountain there. And so he thought it was possibly a ship on fire. He called the Coast Guards and got the captain out, and through binoculars, they were able to see that this was actually a huge eruption starting there. And soon the island of Surtsey was born. Several other islands popped up in the vicinity, but they sank back again. Surtsey kept getting bigger and bigger. And the eruption actually lasted for 4 years. Surtsey has become very, very well known around the world. And the spotlight of the world for some time was shown towards Iceland, and on this island, biologists and botanists were extremely interested in it. The Icelandic geologist, he found out that, Iceland is made out of a kind of a tuff, which is basically material like sand and cinder that is pressed into a rock that we call móberg in Icelandic. And the word móberg actually has found its way into international lingo of geology. But it's a kind of a tuff that many of the mountains of Iceland are made up of. But it needs pressure, it needs tremendous pressure that is usually supplied by the glaciers, because most of the eruptions in Iceland that have occurred in the past, well, Iceland is geological infant, as we know. It's only, the oldest parts are only 17 million years old. And most of this time, probably it was covered with glacier, at least during the past 2 million years. So most of this rock is formed underneath a glacier, but it can also be formed underneath the sea. And it was always supposed to or thought to take hundreds, if not thousands of years for this rock to become solid, cinder and ash and gravel from the volcano. But would you know it, large parts of Surtsey that only took 4 years to form were made out of this tooth, Moberg. And that was highly unusual and something that geologists didn't know. It's about like unique to Iceland in a way, because like the Pseudo-Craters, for example, they are also unique to Iceland. The craters that have not spewed lava, but are kind of like vents. Well, more about Pseudo-Craters later, maybe. Anyway, Surtsey definitely in this the group of the most famous volcanoes in Iceland. Here we see it. This little peninsula is getting bigger and bigger. The ocean is just piling up material that was probably emitted into the sea during the eruption, and is now busy creating an extension to the island. But the rock is soft, so the ocean is hammering at it, of course, from different sides, and taking its toll. It's getting smaller in other places. Already there's life and growth on Surtsey, and people, it is being under, of course, close observation, because it's not every day that people get isolated brand new land that they can observe how life develops. As you can see, there are other islands around, but these are part of the Westmon Islands. About 17 islands off the coast of Iceland, and that is our next destination. Because 10 years after Surtsey had erupted, or started to erupt, in 1973, for the first time, we had an eruption very, very close to where people lived. And that happened in the Westmon Islands. Now I've found some rare footage from the Westmon Islands, and I think I want to play that for you. It's quite interesting.
1963, a new volcano emerges out of the sea to the south of Iceland, Surtsey. The eruption lasts for 4 years. 1973, on the island of Jaime, 20 kilometers away, a fountain of lava erupts 150 meters from the town of Westmon Islands. The city is transformed into a kind of Nordic Pompeii. Hundreds of houses are buried in the ash and scoria, or crushed by lava flows. In the crater, the eruptions are particularly violent, as lava meets seawater. A few months later, a new volcano stands above the town, Eldfell, the Mountain of Fire.
Yeah, that was a short introduction to actually probably a longer film, but it has footage. You see, the Icelandic television had just started at the time when the eruption in the Westmon Islands occurred, and they managed to place, like they have done now for Geldingadalur, a camera to and broadcast it live, the eruption and what was happening in the town at the time. But it was all in black and white. And when I came across some color footage, I thought that would be interesting to show. But how did it look from the point of view of the islanders themselves? I also found the footage of from a fella who actually lived there and managed to get some interesting shots on his camera. Let's take, this is how it looks like now. Let's take a look at that. It comes right here. It's a very old, I mean, the quality is not that good, but it still is worth seeing because it's in color and it is the perspective of a fella who lived it, who was from there.
I live on a small island of Heima, which felt some little earth tremors, but none of us expected the eruption to open a fissure a mile long, just outside our little fishing town of Westmon Islands. To wake up the town, and we were told to go down to the harbor. Fishing boats were standing by to take our families to the mainland.
In Iceland, the plates are splitting and spreading. Lava erupts at the surface through fissures or rifts. Burning gases escape without much violence.
On the second day, all activity died away except for one crater in the middle of the fissure. Then the wind changed direction, and ash and cinders rained down on the town. Hot cinders sliced through the window panes as easily as a knife through butter.
Occasionally, mild explosive activity, like that on Heime, occurs along the fissures. Usually, the lava floods the countryside. The lava can flow at speeds of 30 miles per hour.
A few weeks later, a great wall of lava moved in the direction of the town and the harbor. In 6 days, 1/5 of the town had disappeared. The buildings that didn't burn were crushed. We discovered that pumpy seawater on the lava seemed to slow down its advance. We worked day and night to stop it before it blocked our harbor entrance.
In one eruption, lava may spread over several hundred square miles, building up enormous plateaus of basaltic rock.
Yes, I cut it short there. Well, I did get to the Westmon Islands prior to the eruption once, And so I got to experience the islands before it erupted. And then, of course, I moved over there several years after the eruption was finished. But the eruption lasted for several months. People, the population, 5,000, all of them got away. Nobody was killed in the eruption itself. And they considered themselves extremely lucky. The reason was that the weather had been really bad the days before the eruption started. And the Westmon Islands provide Iceland with the only decent harbor of the south coast. And most of the fishing boats had come in. It was very, very lucky. And so there was room for everyone to get onto the boats. People almost headed instinctively down to the harbor, grabbing very little with them, if anything, not knowing what was going to happen. Some of the boats circled the island, watching the spectacular events that were taking place. People half hoping that the fires would die down so they would get back into bed. But that was not to happen. Because, like I said, the eruption lasted for almost 6 months, and everything in the island changed after that. For one thing, the island got bigger by 2 square kilometers. You see here on this little map here, but the gray area is the new lava field. When it started flowing towards the harbor, and especially towards the fish factories around the harbor, people got really desperate. And as you could see from that little footage that we just saw, they acquired some very powerful water pumps and started pumping seawater onto it, trying to stop it from coming further into town and not to block the harbor. Many people did not believe that this was going to work, but they persisted. They were extremely resilient. They persisted and kept on pumping the water, and finally it stopped and was diverted more to the east, and like you see, enlarging the island quite a bit. Once the eruption was finished, people came back. Well, most of them came back, it's safe to say, not all though. And they started cleaning the town, getting the ashes out of the town, and building new houses instead of the 400 that were lost and had been damaged or overtaken by the lava altogether, and started their life again, really. And today, of course, there is a thriving village in the Westmon Islands. Look at it, it's a beautiful little island with a beautiful little town there in between the craters, and a live volcano just above it. The mount on the right side is a 5,000-year-old volcano, and to the left there's a volcano that is a little over 50 years old. But a huge puffin colony on the islands on Heimaey, which is the inhabited island, is called Heimaey or Home Island, and on the surrounding islands. And the marine life is spectacular. It's a beautiful place to visit. If you have a chance to come to Iceland, that should be one of your destinations. The lava is, if you dig a little bit into it, it's still hot actually. And for a very long time, it was used to heat up or partially heat up the town with. They laid the pipes through the lava and got it to a certain degree before it was sort of boosted. The heat was boosted, and then it was pumped into the town. So there were some benefits from the eruption, although of course a lot was lost as well. So that's the story of the Westmon Islands. But the Westmon Islands, Surtsey and Eyjafjallajökull, the one we are going to examine next, and Hekla, they are a part of a system, of a volcanic system that is of course, like was well, like they tried to explain in that little footage, it's a part of the huge rupture that runs along the Atlantic ridge. But there's another factor that causes those eruptions, because there's a huge plume. Iceland has a hotspot, one of very few places in the world that has these hotspots, a huge plume of magma that is underneath Iceland that finds, well, it comes up through the weaknesses that are created by the tectonic forces. And this is why Iceland is so highly volcanic, more volcanically active than most other areas on the Atlantic ridge. Now we come to Eyjafjallajökull, an eruption that occurred 2010, 11 years ago. Let me see if we can lower the sound of this a little. But Eyjafjallajökull, like so many of the eruptions, took us by a surprise. And nobody thought it was going to be much of a threat, really. But it soon became clear that that was not true. As the ice melted as the lava melted through the ice, rather, the lava was pulverized into very fine dust. They call it ash. And this ash was carried by the wind, not westward, which would have caused trouble for us, but eastward, and all the way over to Europe. Soon the aviation industry found out that this proved to be extremely dangerous for planes to drive through the ash, and they ordered all air traffic to be grounded in Europe. People were extremely upset because they were stranded on their holidays or couldn't get to their holidays while the ash was so fine. The eruption lasted not for very long, but nevertheless it had a drastic effect on Europe and on the lives of people living thousands of kilometers away, and did not really disrupt much here in Iceland at all. Of course, some of the ash fell onto the ground around the volcano. This is on the south coast as well. I pointed it out on the first pictures to you. So you see it is quite close to the sea. But the farms, some of them were evacuated, of course. But once the eruption was finished, people returned, and the ash proved to have quite beneficial effect on the ground, rich in minerals, and it was almost like a fertilizer for the ground. But the spectacular pictures here, look at this, just a huge flames sticking out of the mountain. The problem is that we never know what the eruption, what effect it's going to have and how it is going to behave. This is very, very difficult. Although we've been studying it for a long time, and we have probably some of the best geologists in the world and volcanists, they still are struggling with telling or recognizing the sign. So Eyjafjallajökull, of course, became very famous, mostly because that nobody could pronounce the name. Icelanders had great fun listening to the meteorologist and the presenter of different television shows around the world, struggling with that name. And in the end, they basically gave up on it, and it just became that the bloody volcano in Iceland is still active. So that takes us to the eruption that is going on right now. And of course, it was heralded by thousands of earthquakes, some of them quite big, and people were getting tired of them. They knew, like the geologists say, that an eruption was very much likely to happen, although they couldn't predict exactly when and where. As it happened, it came up in a valley, a small valley, and it couldn't have actually happened in a better place, because the lava is just flowing there inside the valley at the moment. It's going to take a few days for the volcano to, if it continues like this, to fill up the valley. And this eruption is so accessible that it has become quite popular for people to go up to it and even spend the night around it, cooking food on it and making out like they're on a holiday in a warm land. The weather has been mostly the problem for people that wandered up there. Some people have, of course, did not know that it was such a challenge to get to it. Although it isn't far, you still have to walk, or you had to walk. I think they have changed the route now. You had to walk for 2-3 hours before you got to it and then back. But now they have opened a road that was closed because of the earthquakes again, and people can get to it in about an hour or so. A few kilometers hike, but people are better be prepared for everything, because of course this is a live volcano and unpredictable as such. Gases and poisonous air may linger to the ground, and cracks may open without any kind of a warning. So this you do have to have in mind. It's interesting to see how the world has responded to this. And I found some interesting footage there from the news service around the world. Let's take a look at that. The pictures are spectacular. Of course, they had drones. Everybody has drones these days, and they can get these fantastic pictures. Let's look at this one.
It is a spectacle of the natural world that is both beautiful and deadly. But this volcanic eruption at Geldingadalur has attracted big crowds. It's a tiny volcano by Icelandic standards, but close enough to Reykjavik to tempt hundreds to make a day trip to see for themselves the lava flow. The eruption follows 53,000 earthquakes in the region in the past month. Some have come to study it.
This is very exciting for us because we have been here since a bit more than 2 weeks. So we came really in Reykjavik to analyze deformation here.
While others are conducting more basic experiments. Yes, lava is hot enough for a fry-up, but one false move and breakfast is cancelled. Remarkably, bad weather has posed the greatest danger to the public so far, with rescue teams helping lost visitors back to their cars.
It is true that people have been camping there with their tents just to enjoy the view during the night. They are getting very close to the lava fronts, or they got very close to the crater vent, where indeed we know the activity could be really unpredictable, and the edges of these cones, they are quite unstable and they might collapse.
Scientists are closely monitoring the eruption, but say the lava could continue to flow for days or weeks. Icelandic authorities are working to create an access route that can let visitors enjoy this wonder of nature safely. Martha Fairley, News at 10.
Yes, and since this was filmed and put out there, the Icelandic authorities, they have cleared the road, at least one lane of it, Suðurlandsvegur, which runs much closer to the volcano than the route that people had to take before. Of course, now COVID is probably playing up again in Iceland, and it is a question how that is going to be handled, because now at midnight tonight, the restriction goes down to 10 people together from 100 where it was, and that may play a part, although I haven't heard anything about that. It's just my imagination, really. There's another short video that I like to show you from the place. And again, it is a foreign news channel that has put this on for you.
expectations are that with this topographically confined area, it'll begin to fill up a little bit like a bathtub, and it depends on how long the eruption goes on. But there's just one spillway, and that's over there. So if the eruption continues for a longer period of time, we might have quite a show once that bathtub begins to drain into the next area. So it's quite an interesting eruption. It didn't really begin with a strong bang, but instead we've had this fantastic earthquake swarm with probably 50,000 earthquakes in a month. And so the magma had been gradually rising towards the surface, and is now producing a relatively small eruption compared to the last one in Iceland, Polarhern in 2014-2015, which was a much bigger event. So this one's close to Reykjavik and fantastic setting to study.
Of course, the prediction is now that this may last for quite a while.
Yeah, most beautiful thing that I have seen is volcano. We are just making the people safe and yeah, trying to have that people have distance from the lava. People are getting like a little bit nervous about it because it has been for 2 weeks straight or 3 weeks, I don't know. But now that's down and this is up, so yeah, that's good. Good equipment, be in good clothes. It's cold in Iceland. It's hard to walk here. The wind can change at every time, so you have to think about gas and stuff like that. Like we are now with the winter problem.
Yep, I think we will leave this guy for now. And I was wondering whether that would be enough water there to create this very rare phenomenon that we call Pseudo-Craters. When water gets trapped underneath the red hot lava, has nowhere to go, but it gets superheated and then bursts up and leaves these indentations in the lava field that are said to be so rare and spectacular. I mean, they must have happened all around the earth because much of the land is made up of lava, of basalt lava. But here in Iceland, I guess because Iceland is such a new country, they are still intact and not just have not been grinded down and destroyed. But of course, there are other eruptions. We have had eruptions on average every 4 or 5 years in Iceland, and there are other eruptions I didn't cover here, like the Cropland eruption in the 70s that lasted for a very long time, and was quite foreboding because at the time they were building a geothermal power station quite close there, and the lava was heading directly towards it. But as it chose a path that bywent it and flowed on the side of it and so on, it was quite exciting for Icelanders to watch anyway, mostly because that they were afraid of losing the investment that they had put into that power plant. But that did not happen. And of course, there have been smaller eruptions in Grímsvötn as well. Well, that one was quite consequential. I didn't cover it because I didn't think I have the time, but an enormous amount of ice was melted down in that eruption that eventually found its way out of the glacier and took with it, as it flowed through into the sea, rivers, took with it bridges and roads, and it actually destroyed the ring road. We couldn't get from the east to the west, or vice versa, and it took some time to repair. So people from the south coast that was to the east, they had to drive around the country in order to get to Reykjavik to the south for quite a while. But this is life, and the road construction people in Iceland have become experts of dealing with this. The last time this happened was in a small eruption also in the south of Iceland, and they built the bridge passable and usable within a week, which is quite a miracle actually. But they are cool customers, those people. So I have now been going on for about an hour, and I promised this wouldn't be longer. So I think we'll sign off now. Want to thank you all for joining me, and hope to see you all again, or used to see me on the next Wednesday, or even sooner. I may be bringing you another virtual tour, but hoping, like I said before, to get out there. I do plan to get over to Geldingadalur and see this live, and perhaps we are able to bring you a live report from there. But a lot of people are doing it, as you can see. What I can add to it, but let's see. So thank you for joining, and have a pleasant evening or good night.